Yay.
Hi. Hey, hi, Jamie.
Hi, good morning, finally.
Yeah. Really good to see you today. And what a week.
Aye, indeed. What a week. If only I could be there with you, we'd be at the bar doing this pint. You know,
A Guinness in hand. Yeah. Live
aye,
from Dublin today. So, which is lovely.
aye,
So, your essays this week have really had a huge impact. There's been lots for us to talk about, and I think maybe thinking about how you described this week your script garden and what was happening at stage zero. Let's start there today.
aye. Well, stage zero itself, it's a bit cheeky from me, but a bit of controversy there. But um, I've been thinking a lot. I've been getting emails from Marge, and I've been thinking a lot about this field guide that's coming. And I wanted to really look at, you know, I don't do clinical. Right? First of all, I do poetry. And I'm inside of this. I am a gestalt processor. I
Mm,
am, who I am, and I've had my experiences as I've had them. But I've always kind of been uncomfortable with the inclusivity of stage one, right? And all of the things that it contains. And so my mind kind of centered around weather patterns and seasons and things where for me, stage one is spring. Stage one is the flowers are blooming, things are happening, right? Delayed echolalia implies that there is something to work with, right? There is a bulb in the ground that rose up and bloomed. And so we cannot tell the tulip when it's time to bloom.
mm,
It does it in its own season. And
yeah,
so the winter time, there's a lot happening under the ground, right? It's not dead, it's not empty, but there's all sorts of things going. And so my mind was going like that, this seasonal aspect. And because of that time frame that I'm writing about, was spent with my grandmother and her garden and cottage. It kind of takes on that flavor,
mm,
and speaking of that time, the early 70s, that, rather a Victorian kind of mindset of children should be seen and not heard. For somebody who would now be described as delayed in speech,
hmm,
nobody noticed because nobody expected me to speak,
yeah,
right? And so, there became problems when they would ask questions and I didn't have the response. And then, you get a bit of, don't look at me with that smug look on your face and all that kind of stuff. And the smug look was, I have no idea what to say. This is called panic, and I can interpret that now with words, but then it was just terror. Like, I don't know. I hear things coming. I have some stored scrapes. I have no correlation between, thank you and good night and more news at 11 and all of these kinds of things that I
yeah,
heard
yeah.
from them. And, what do you want for dinner? And those types of germinations that are happening, from a standpoint of delayed echolalia in stage one, there has to be a mechanism, a correlation that says this input should trigger this output,
Mm,
right? That has to happen, but it has to happen with scripts. I have to be able to play with them. And so across this kind of non-speaking series, I'm talking about the theater of my mind, that
hmm,
I can, in my mind,
hmm,
I can speak these things. I can play with them. I can feel the tone, the intonation, the rhythm. And for me, I want to be faithful to it,
yeah.
right? And that fidelity is very important. Because there are a lot of emotions and things attached to it. And you know, I can think about now, like very few people smoke cigarettes anymore. But my gran was a chain smoker. And so when I smelled cigarette smoke, instantly memories are popping in, right? So these sensory triggers that are happening.
Mm,
And I blend an element of that into some of the pieces in this series about the triggers now that happen and cause these memories to come to fore. But I realize again, the BBC Me thing that's happening in my head all the time. There is a bit of um challenge in that, proposing a stage zero ahead of a stage one. And so I tried to be very delicate about that. And I wanted to be very explicitly non-commercial. Like there is no program that you can buy to do this, right?
No.
Sit down with your children,
Yeah, yeah,
chat to them,
yeah,
you know, put on their
yeah.
favorite, telly and just enjoy. And I was thinking also of that so-called Peppa Pig effect, where there were a lot of American children with these scripts that sound very British. And there's a paper from the 90s about the South Asian population of London and how the kids sound like their gran. And how do we do that? Because it's so very un-British. We want them to sound proper. But all of that's going on in my mind as I'm kind of gathering the field, as it were, to properly write this field guide.
And I think you what you've just said is the I suppose when I first read it, my thought was, oh my goodness, are people going to start thinking, like you said, they've got to follow a program or they've got to do something to make children, young children take that leap from, or non-speaking children and young people from stage zero to stage one, when actually all of your other articles around it are really absolutely about non-compliance, about um, the script garden. And I have this image from when, not just your writing, but from when we talk about you and your grandmother, and how you're, whilst you might have been non-speaking and being seen and not heard, and that was okay, you were gathering all of this language. It was inside, and that really reflects, I would say, what Marge has always said about language starts within, but how you describe it in terms of that, the rhythm, the senses, um, the whole experience is fabulous.
Well, thank you. I think some of that pushback, because I am kind of very organically oriented, let's just say. I want parents and grandparents and children to chat to each other and to get to know each other. I think in my mind when I'm writing, like in today's piece, well, wrote a week ago, but for today, right? That if you treat speech as performance and you reward performance, the child learns performance.
Mm,
And when you're rewarding performance, then the child learns very quickly that these are the things that will get the thing that I want. And so
mm,
then there is no authenticity to that. And
no.
and this is something I learned in hospital, that certain words that were mine, representing my feelings, kept me longer at hospital. And they were looking for very specific words in a very specific order that would allow me to leave. That would feel safe enough for me to leave. And so I've written about this a few times about my very first shutdown as an autistic person, and then not having the scripts for inpatient psychiatry. Like, I don't know what you want, right? But that's where this whole performance is rewarded thing kind of comes from, where I wasn't necessarily authentic in the words that I've finally figured out from people in group therapy and that kind of stuff. I just figured out what they said that got them out.
Yeah,
And I borrowed that. And for me, that's kind of the lesson for stage zero is we just want organic conversations. We just want, you know, happy families and flowing love. And we don't want to reward, be a good girl and say this.
yeah,
Uh, I'm very, I think, very nervous about that. So I was very explicit today about, ownership of the output. And so when I use a script myself, as I'm
mm-hmm,
now old and mitigating like crazy, um, I want to be very authentic in what I'm saying, right? And so
yeah,
I've talked about safety and unmasking first on purpose because you have to have safety to do that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, masking is performance. That's all it is, and you're performing a kind of act so that you can
Yeah.
eat, so that you can have, in America, it's healthcare, that kind of stuff. And so I was very careful to do that first. And then I was, you know, careful to do the follow-up about clocks, and executive functioning, because that is a kind of training as well. Hey, use this post-it note strategy, use this, use Jamie's special notebook at 59.95, plus shipping. I never wanted to do that. I just wanted to
Yeah.
plainly about, we're operating in Kairos, but we're living in Chronos, and just to name that. And the the comments I've received, I think people get it.
Yeah. But I think you also, when you're describing what's happening with when whether it's you or this when people are non-speaking about this sort of idea of silence not being without language, that there's loads of language going on in that silence, but it needs that safety, the timing, the rhythm, whatever it might be, um, for all of that, the barrel of information to be able to be expressed.
Right. And I do want to be careful because for me, all of this is translation. It's all translation labor. My
Yeah.
brain, it stores scripts, but that's not the default operating system. That's not how it works.
No.
And so that I'm older now, I can do this, but it is not without cost. My brain is a repository of barrels of things, right? When I'm processing something, I'm not processing it in language. I'm feeling it like weather, like, pressure and electricity. And it's a very, language is a very limited thing in my experience. And so to translate the experiences and stuff, it's like you have that beer barrel and you want to put it in a shot glass. Things are going to spill. It's going to be messy. It's not going to work very well. And as I've gotten older and a lot of what's on the outside is practice for me, and I can see the evolution of my writing
Mm,
and my ability to be clear. And um, it's not easy. Let's just put it that way. It's not very easy. It's not natural. It's not normal.
no.
Um, and I'm not minimally verbal. I'm not non-verbal. Some of the assignments that were given to my diagnostic case file is probably bigger than my hand. Late emerging, late identified. These things change. I'm still
Mm,
Jamie. Um, but for me, the seasonal aspect makes more sense to me. Winter, things are dormant, things are happening underground. We kind of see what's happening with the tulip bulb, but it's going gangbusters, getting ready for spring to jump out there and do wonderful things. And the garden, how there has to be cultivation. That it's not just corn, it's not just apple tree. It's this wide variety of things. Tomatoes and strawberries and a Southern California thing, boysenberry, which is, oh my gosh, it's amazing. All of these things that my grandmother had in her garden. And, I would be foraging and I'd find a pebble and like, oh, I like this. I put it in my pocket. And, I have these little collection of little knickknacks and rocks and things that I found. That's where I like to see language. Like
mm,
I'm out at the shop. I'm at the park, I'm at school, I'm at, some relatives gathering or whatever, and I'm hearing these things, and I like the sound of that. Oh, I like the sound of that. I like how that feels when I roll it around, just like a pebble in your pocket. And so, in that script garden, there isn't any kind of logic to the pebbles I've grabbed out of the ground. It's like, oh, I like this one, right? And for me, as a youngling and my adoptive family, my father, he loved the war movies. right? And my introduction to Richard Dawson, the actor, right? And I was always, in primary school, there was fights galore. But I like that, some of his witticisms and his funny lines and stuff, I borrowed them, you know, and because they seem to fit the moment, the action. So I was like, oh, I might need that, right? This was said, the fight started. Okay, I'm probably going to need that one, and all of those crazy kinds of things. Um, but it's very difficult in the beginning to say this is going to be useful. It's just I like the way this sounds. I like the way this
Yeah.
feels, right? And it wasn't, there were certain utilitarian things like Richard Dawson and so on. It was more feeling than, oh, that makes sense. I'm going to borrow that one. Intentionality, that kind of correlation to action and words. And that's why everything seemed incoherent at the beginning.
Yeah. And I guess that's the case for so many of our youngsters in terms of how they begin, and how we may, as a speech and language therapist, that's how they arrive. And I'm thinking, I wonder if they are a GLP. And sometimes it's that sort of very beginning, like you've just described, that gives me that clue. So, Jamie, I feel like maybe we need to stop there today, ready for next week, because
Yes.
we've been going a little while now. But looking forward to next week. You gave me a few little clues about what you might be writing about this week, which is very exciting. So, as always, thank you so much.
Oh, it's always my pleasure. And again, I wish I was in Dublin and people watching and all of those lovely things that you're doing there. I'm a bit jealous of that, but yes, it's always lovely to talk to you.
So, see you next week.
Yes, see you next week at the proper time.
Yes.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye bye.